Good, good. Becky, you come up there at the barn? Becky play bass?
Yeah.
He plays guitar?
Yeah.
He's pastor of Church of God up there. In Rackle Garden.
They all the same. You know, person that told me one time.
He came out here one time. In person.
He was what he told his church. And I just keep his church
Thank you so much. Let's turn to Romans chapter 8. I know we're running late. That's okay. Romans chapter 8.
Romans 8. Romans 8. 31 through 34.
I think it says in Ecclesiastes that it's better to have the knowledge and not use it than need it and not have it. And I don't believe that you can have too much knowledge if you don't get puffed up. And there are different means. They say one thing with a preacher, he needs memory, and I don't have it. I've trained my mind in the wrong direction. And that is, I was taught by one of my professors that if you put it to, in other words, if you write it down, I don't try to commit to memory everything that I read, for instance, but I do study. When Richard gave me his computer back in 2003, and then I got on the internet for the first time, AOL, which I'm still on, AOL. And I began to study for the next probably 4 years, maybe, before I came here. At least 8 hours a day in studying, and I discovered a website, Monetism.com. And Monetism is a theological reform website that has a vast amount of information. What I did, let me give you an illustration that I'm using today, and the material I've got in this volume is from 2004. That's what I'm trying to tell you, that in April of 2004, I was on the topic of assurance and the perseverance of the saint, and I turned to that particular site, and they had compiled 107 articles from different resources and websites. 107 articles on assurance and the perseverance of the saints. And so what I did was, I realized when I went through all this that the number of pages that it would take. So normally what I did was I would take the first page, can a Christian lose his or her salvation? And it had 4 pages. And then I would print the first page and save on the disk the other pages for future references. And then this one article, Will the Unholy Be Saved, by Aaron H. Murray. And it had 14 pages of print. And then, which is I did like that, I did print that off. And then I went through and in this particular volume, there are 40 articles. There are 40 articles in just this volume right here of information that pertains to assurance and the perseverance of the saint. And not knowing that in 2012 I would be preaching on Romans, and now I'm in the perseverance of the saints section of the security of the believer. What does someone else believe and think? And so I pull this out, and then the other one is this one, and then restating it in outline, and this one is on the atonement of Jesus Christ. And this is on the atonement, the cross. And in this particular section, there was 86 articles in this one particular section. And so this was done earlier. And what I did was I went through and I printed the first page of all 86 articles. And when I brought it up, then I downloaded it onto one of these little floppy disks. You remember those 3.5 floppy disks that are no good now?
Yep.
You know? And so here I have over 100 of these little disks that I have stored with all this information in it that my new computer cannot even play, and even those, they lose their ability after a while. So all of that work went in to waste per se, but Monetism.com is still on the air. And so what I've done is I can still go back and learn it. And one of the texts is one of the material outlines or materials I got, the extent of the atonement. Who did Christ die for? And that was done in February 27th, 2004. So what I'm trying to say to you is you don't know where God will lead you from 2004 to 2012. You don't know where the Lord's leading you. But just in case He leads me somewhere, and Charity kept saying to me when I was saying, no, 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 she said, the Lord is not finished with you yet.
That's right.
And I kept saying, I think He is. And Bob Temple said, Charles, you aren't getting to be 60. And nobody wants you to pastor a church when you're 60. And it's almost there. And so I just assumed that I'd be hitting golf balls in the field down where I lived on 23. And kind of enjoyed it. And you don't know. You really don't know. God has the future, and He sees the future, and if you'll just pay attention, sometimes those things will work out. Now, did the Lord want me over here? Well, I'm here. About all I can say. Am I glad I'm here? Most of the time. And is it the desire of my heart? The desire of my heart is to preach the gospel. The desire of my heart is not necessarily where I'm at. The desire of my heart is to be able to preach the Word of God and have a few people that sort of want to hear it. And that's what I desire, and to be able to teach. And I know I'm very selfish with this pulpit, and it's because I'm a very selfish person, I guess. But I enjoy teaching, and I trust that you have learned to listen. And it's encouraging at times when my own wife likes it. And I wonder, I asked her, I said, honey, you know me so well. I said, how is it that you're still able to hear me preach and believe what I'm saying? You know, if you know a person real well, and you know who they are, and then you get up to preach, you says, why is that person preaching for? And so, Charity sees me 24/7, and I do appreciate the idea that she has had the joy in this church to hear me preach, because she didn't hear me preach for 16 years in Altoona, but because she was always doing something else. But I do share with you that I enjoy studying. And I spent 8 hours a day for 5 years getting an education that I did not know whether or not I was going to use it or not. But the joy to be in the Word and studying is worth it all, I'll tell you. There's nothing that's in more. And there's no boring time. Don't get bored. Get learning. And I think that's so important. I don't even know what a boring person is. I think it's a sin to get bored. There's too much to do otherwise. But we're in Romans chapter 8. And once again, I was looking at this verse. We're down in verse 31. What shall we then say to those things that we've just finished reading in 28 through verse 30? If God be for us, who can be against us? And then the phrase, the next verse says this in his argument: He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? So here's Paul's argument. The argument that Paul gives us is, notice the last two words in verse 32, as all things. Now you remember, back in verse 38, he says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. All things. And of course there are those who would say, you mean to say to me, all things are to work out for God's purpose and glory. And that's the argument. Paul comes back and he gives objections, he gives propositions, he gives all kinds of things that we even mentioned last week. And he says in verse 32, and I had not caught it, he that spared not his own Son,